Hello and welcome to another Frontline recap. We'll be looking at the major events in the week around Russia and the war in Ukraine, and discussing some of the things that the Times Radio Frontline experts have brought out this week. Now, I'll caveat everything. Things are changing so fast, so some of the things that I may say may change in the next few hours depending on what comes out of the White House or out of Moscow or out of elsewhere, because I have never come across a geopolitical situation that is changing very quickly indeed. But the first thing I want to start with is Donald Trump talking about the negotiations that happened between his team and President Zelensky's team in Saudi Arabia.
We had a great success yesterday. We have a full ceasefire. If it kicks in, we have to see. It's up to Russia now. But we've had a good relationship with both parties, actually, and we'll see. We'll be knowing people are going to Russia right now as we speak, and hopefully we can get a ceasefire from Russia. And if we do, I think that would be 80% of the way to getting this horrible bloodbath finished. It's a bloodbath is taking place over there.
And Trump saying he saw it as a great success, and it was a great success because it seemed to undo all the issues that had been caused by the ambush of Zelensky by J.D. Vance in the Oval Office only a few short days beforehand. So Trump emphasized that he had a good relationship with both parties, and he was expecting Russia to acquiesce to some of the peace deals that were in. But then Trump turns around and there's a question comes off camera. How do you know that President Putin will keep the ceasefire considering he's broken them in the past? And this is what Donald Trump has to say.
We haven't spoken to him yet with substance, because we just found out and we just were able to get Ukraine to agree. So we're going to know very soon. I've gotten some positive messages, but a positive message means nothing. This is a very serious situation. This is a situation that could lead to World War III. And Biden should have never let it happen.
So I think Donald Trump fully expected that whenever his team gets into Moscow and sits down and negotiate with Putin's team, that there will be a positive outcome. When we're recording this, which is Thursday afternoon, his team has just arrived in Moscow and negotiations will be starting. So the outcome of those may be in the public domain before you've actually seen this. I haven't seen it yet. That's in the future. And as an intelligence officer, my crystal ball gazing may be good, but it's not quite that good. The next comment from a media pool journalist asking off camera, is there anything you can do in a way of pressurizing Russia or sending sanctions that way? Donald Trump had this to say.
I hope it's not going to be necessary. Sure, we can pressure. We can do that with Russia. Remember this, Russia took Georgia from Bush, right? They took Crimea from a man named Obama, Barack Hussein Obama, right? They're trying to take the whole thing from Biden. They're going for the whole ball of wax. Who was the only one that never took anything from? Trump. Difficult party. You were here a week ago when some interesting. There are things you could do that wouldn't be pleasant in a financial sense. I can do things financially that would be very bad for Russia. I don't want to do that because I want to get peace. I want to see peace, and we'll see. But in a financial sense, yeah, we could do things very bad for Russia. It would be devastating for Russia, but I don't want to do that because I want to see peace. And we're getting close to maybe getting something done. We've got Ukraine done, and as you know, I've always said that Ukraine might have been the more difficult party. You were here a week ago when some interesting things happened. I had somebody that didn't seem to want peace. Now he's agreed to peace. So we'll see what happens.
And of course, in what he's saying, he took a swipe at all of his predecessors, which Donald Trump seems to do at every occasion, but then suggests that he doesn't want to take sanctions. He's sending a clear message to Vladimir Putin: either cooperate, or and I want you to cooperate, or there's things that we can do. And he's brought that out in further statements. And again, with the Irish Prime Minister, or the Taoiseach, Michael Martin, and Trump in the Oval Office with the media, Donald Trump went on to say what it was that he could do. And in that, he emphasized the fact that he could make things financially very bad for Russia. And actually, that's the way to hit Russia hard There's a lot of sanctions on Russia at the moment, but actually the Russian shadow fleet is still transporting oil around the world. That oil is not going directly into the EU, it's going to China, going to India, going to other third-party countries who are refining it into diesel and petrol and other products. And those countries are then selling it into the EU and to the UK and elsewhere. So the Russian oil trade is still taking over and financing an awful lot of what Russia can do. The price of oil coming down, and Donald Trump did talk about the price of oil getting down to $65 a barrel. If that comes right down, then that will undermine Russia's ability to continue to finance its conflict. I don't think there's any accident that the negotiations between Trump and Zelensky's team happened in Saudi Arabia. That oil link is critical. The economic link is critical. Okay, and the next bit is we see Vladimir Putin for the first time during his special military operation or full-scale invasion of Ukraine in combat gear. And this time he goes allegedly into the Kursk region. And Putin, by going in combat gear into the Kursk region, is turning around and emphasizing just how important that is to him. And the fact that the Russians have taken a big chunk of the Kursk region back after the delivery of US derived intelligence has blinded the Ukrainians partially, shows that Putin is sending a very clear statement that he has got the initiative, and that will set the conditions for his negotiating position with the American team that have just landed in Moscow as we're recording this. Okay, and we've got two videos from Frontline today that I recommend that you watch both of them. The first one I urge you to watch is from Yuri Felshtinsky. And Yuri talks about the geopolitics coming out of Russia from Putin's perspective, how he's dealing with Washington, how he's dealing with the EU, how he's trying to manipulate things and will try and delay everything so that he can set better conditions for any final settlement.
Russia is not interested to stop the war. Russia is interested in taking Ukraine, but what's important to understand that Russia actually, from the military point of view, Russia failed. They tried to take Ukraine in 2014. They could not. They have to stop in 2015 and wait for some years. They tried to take Ukraine in a kind of blitzkrieg in 22 when Russian troops moved into direction of Kiev from Belarus, and they failed. And for 3 years now, they actually, they are progressing in terms of taking control of territories, but the speed is so slow, and they are losing so many people that militarily they are not able to take Ukraine. That's why they are trying to take it with the help of Trump through capitulation of Ukraine. But if capitulation would not take place, if Ukraine would not agree to surrender, then I think Putin has actually, as Trump will say, no cards in his pockets anymore. That's all he could do. He cannot win this war from the military point of view. He could continue to ruin Ukraine with a certain speed, but again, the speed is very, very slow. His only hope, and his last hope, is to use Trump to force Ukraine to capitulate. I think he failed. I think they failed, Putin and Trump, because the idea was that as soon as Trump announces that American assistance is stopped, everybody would become, will start to panic, and Europe will start to force Ukraine to agree with Trump's plan or Putin's plan. But this didn't happen. I think this didn't happen. Europe basically realized, I think, what the plan is. Europe understands that Putin is not going to stop in Ukraine. I think this is understood in Britain, this is understood in France, and this is understood in Germany, and this is definitely understood in countries like Poland and the Baltic states and in Finland. So Europe has no choice. Europe has to have Ukraine to win this war.
And can Europe, without US support, provide a deterrent to Russia? Does Putin care about Europe if there is no US backstop?
Well, economically speaking, Europe is much stronger than Russia. In terms of population, Europe is much bigger than Russia. So we do understand, of course, that Russia is ready to send, people to die, and Russia is ready to kill, and Europe prefer not to do this. But it's not that Europe is not strong enough. It's a political decision, and it's an understanding of the problem. I think the major problem which we had for the last 3 years, when both Biden administration and Europe was hoping that somehow this war will die itself. The approach basically was that you help Ukraine, but you give them as much weapons as they would need, to hold the front. But the idea was that Ukraine should not win this war, and Russia should not lose this war. For two reasons. One, because Russia is a nuclear power, and who knows, maybe if they are losing this war, they would escalate this war into nuclear. And second, well, actually, Russia is a weak country, and if it's, if it's going to be ruined the way it was ruined in 91, and instead of Russia we will have several states, then we will have several problems instead of one problem. I think that if the first point about nuclear confrontation, has certain weight, the second one, of course, is not. But that's why for 3 years Ukraine was not getting what it's needed. And what is more important, Ukraine actually was not allowed to use Western weapons for the strikes against Russian territory. Ukraine had the right to use these weapons only for the strike against Ukrainian occupied territories, but not against the Russian Federation. It's only at the very end of the Biden administration, finally the permission was given to strike against the Russian Federation territory, right? But this was too late, of course, and I think that's what's important. What is important for Europe to give Ukraine everything Ukraine needs. Ukrainian army, by the way, from military point of view, is doing absolutely great. Absolutely great. No one actually expected this from Ukrainians. They're holding this aggression for 3 years, and they're doing great. But they need equipment, and they need permission to do what they want to do. I think if this is given, the situation will be changed very quickly for better.
His understanding of Putin and from Russia, from the Russian perspective and from the Putin psychology perspective is fantastic. I can't do it justice by talking about it, so I urge you very strongly to watch it. Our second video is from Kurt Volker, who was Trump's representative in his first administration. Kurt, again, has been doing the rounds on different press outlets across the UK. He understands Trump.
I don't see Vladimir Putin ever giving up on his absolutist demands to eliminate Ukraine as a sovereign, independent state, eliminate Ukrainian national identity, to remove Zelensky and impose his own government in Ukraine. I don't see him giving up on any of that. So I think the likelihood of an actual agreement with Russia is very low. What I do see is a possibility you could move from a tenuous ceasefire to a more stable ceasefire, and one where you continue to have differences, but they're not being resolved on the battlefield.
But if Vladimir Putin is not prepared to ultimately give up on his maximalist demands, what response, if any, do you think we will see from the US? Would they at that point be prepared to say, we will row in even more fully behind Ukraine?
I think what you're likely to see is the emergence of a deterrent capability that's combined security assurances from Europe, support for training and equipping of Ukrainians. So that continues, including from European allies. Perhaps a European force presence in Ukraine as a deterrent capability, and also assisting with development of Ukraine's own armed forces. Those sorts of, and backup from the United States, which I think will be important to the Europeans. I think those things are possible to create a deterrent. It would be great if there was actually an agreement. But given what we know about Vladimir Putin, I think that's unlikely. And I think we end up more in a East Germany, West Germany type situation where we have a long-term disagreement, but there's no fighting going on.
You mentioned backup from the United States. I mean, Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, has been talking about this idea of a US backstop so that potentially you have European peacekeeping troops, probably British and French peacekeeping troops on the ground in Ukraine, but the US providing, whether it's air cover, whether it's some final security guarantee that if Putin were to invade and threaten those peacekeeping troops, that the US would intervene then. Clearly, that's what the Europeans would like. But can you really see Trump agreeing to that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of pieces here. We should break them down a little bit. There's what people have referred to as backbone, and there's what people have referred to as backstop. And backbone being enablers, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, maybe some logistical capability to transport things through. Those sort of enablers as a backbone, that seems to me quite doable in a normal scenario where Europe deploys some forces to Ukraine but needs a bit of assistance. Then you have backup, which could be in extremis support for European forces. And this is premised on the idea that there's a ceasefire that is not being violated. And only if Russia were to violate that ceasefire and be attacking the European forces, then the US would in extremis help them out. That also seems to me to be doable. But to get there, what President Trump has insisted on is the Europeans have to put their cards on the table. They have to say what they're prepared to do. He's not going to put US forces on the table up front, because that always has the effect of then Europe working around that. And he wants Europe to actually take a lead.
And I think most analysts would certainly agree that Europe for too long has essentially been, they've been free riders off the back of American defense spending and sheltering under the American security umbrella in Europe. And it's absolutely right that the Europeans pay their own way when it comes to defense. The problem is, despite the positive mood music from Friedrich Merz in terms of increasing German defense spending as a percentage of GDP, the British proposing much the same, and we've seen expansion of Polish and Danish defense spending, the impact of that is going to take many years, maybe many decades to fully be felt. In the short to medium term, even British and French peacekeeping troops on the ground, it may not be more than a few tens of thousands, and that may not be enough to effectively deter Vladimir Putin. So do you still not need the US there in some way, shape, or form?
Yes, you don't. Remember that you have close to 1 million Ukrainian men at arms, or men and women at arms. And that is the primary deterrent. They will be there along the front lines. European forces would be present. They would be training and equipping. They would be potentially helping with air defense. And I think adding to the Ukrainian capability, but not seeking to replace it or solely deter Putin. And again, this is all premised on a ceasefire. I don't think any Europeans are thinking about putting forces in Ukraine if the war is still actively going on. It is getting to a ceasefire, providing some stabilization of that to deter an outbreak of new fighting.
The messages that are coming out from what he's saying are that Trump actually supports Ukraine. No matter what we've been saying, Trump wants Ukraine on side. He will do everything to try and make sure that Ukraine comes out remaining a sovereign territory, giving the minimal amount away, but to allow Trump to get within his ego some form of settlement within his 100 days. And the pressure we'll start to see coming onto Putin. As we're recording this, Trump's team has just arrived in Moscow. Putin's team has just turned around and said that they want more from a peace settlement. They won't accept European or NATO troops on the ground. They want the whole of the oblasts in the disputed region, not just the areas that they've captured. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. I urge you strongly to watch Kurt and Kurt's video. So thanks for watching this week's recap. The 2 videos that we've got are definitely worth watching. I'm Philip Ingram. See you soon.